Hey everyone, I'm Harrison, founder of Token Foundry. So I started Token Foundry out of Consensys, which is the largest blockchain company in the world, about a year and a half ago. And our vision was to help tokenize the world and bring forward the tokenized future in a safe and fair way. So I'm just going to talk to you today a little bit about what we do and how we do it before our projects. Tell you a little bit more about what they do. So to start, we are an advisory group who helps decentralized networks up to Fortune 50 companies who are interested in tokenizing an aspect of their business or their industry go through the whole process of doing that. So that involves ideation, network design to actually figure out how to best architect these networks, and design them in a way so that they're actually decentralized, and then coming up with incentive systems and tokens that help power these networks and actually have real utility and use. So we work with about 15 clients ranging all sorts of industries and use cases of blockchain. But to also start, one thing that I think is important to understand is there are a lot of different tokens out there. So like a lot of people think like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are one thing, but tokens, especially the ones that we create, are very different than what cryptocurrency is. So there's different types of tokens. Right now we focus on 4 major ones. So our main focus is on utility and work tokens. So that would be like similar to Ether, which is used to power a decentralized network and pay for computation, or to stake to run a node. But there are also other sorts of tokens, such as security or investment tokens, which could represent equity ownership in a company, or revenue share, or bonds, or loans, or all sorts of different like traditional securities that you could tokenize. But we also do asset-backed tokens, which could represent land or cars or any physical asset or digital asset, and non-fungible tokens, which could be things like CryptoKitties or all sorts of different digital collectibles or books or movies or all sorts of different things that are being tokenized now. So one quick example I'll give, because I think this is good for people to understand utility tokens. So when our projects who talk today explain their projects and the tokens and networks they're building, one thing that helps people understand better what a utility token is if you think of a taxi medallion, for example, like a New York City taxi medallion. It gives you the right to perform a specific function within a defined network. So in this case, a taxi medallion allows you to drive a taxi in New York City. And when you think about these decentralized networks and tokens that are used to power them, we like to think of this as a good base for how those tokens should be designed. And one important thing to note is that the value generated from the taxi network does not come from just buying these taxi medallions and holding them. The value is derived from what that token or taxi medallion enables you to do, in this case, drive a taxi, where most of the value you get from owning these taxi medallions is from using them, not just from holding them. So one thing I'd like to talk about with you guys is how investors should really start thinking about getting involved in the token space and token economy and where they could really find value. Quickly, why we like decentralized networks. Leveraging shared infrastructure is very valuable. Right now you have a lot of siloed businesses, like if you look at ride sharing, where you have Uber, Lyft, Get, all these different businesses that have these siloed infrastructures that basically do the same thing. But if you are able to bring legacy industries onto a shared infrastructure, you get not only added benefits, but you get exponential benefits. And one good example of this is like the telecom industry, where AT&T, Verizon, all these different telecom companies realized that it would not be beneficial to them and the telecom industry if each of them had siloed infrastructure that didn't interoperate. Because imagine if you were using one cell phone provider and you were not able to easily call people on another, So that's where they realized if we leverage shared infrastructure and we focus on just customer experience and price and things, but all use the same underlying technology, that will provide a better experience to consumers, and it will also exponentially benefit us and the growth of our industry. And it will happen to other industries as they start moving over to decentralized networks. And the other very cool thing is, for the first time ever, you will have everyone who is on the same side. So in the current model with like Uber, where you have these investors who fund these new networks, the early drivers of these networks who helped get Uber to the point it is today really got no added benefit for helping this network take off. And now these drivers are actually getting penalized because when you have a central entity controlling these networks and investors who are fundamentally at odds with the users of the networks, the investors in Uber are trying to extract as much value out of the network and out of the equation as possible, where they're taking 30% of the revenue from a ride. If you were to replace that with a decentralized version where you could have a staking model similar to a New York City taxi medallion that gave drivers the right to participate in this network, not only would you be able to not need to extract value out of that equation, because if the token is properly designed, it could capture the value of this network and the growth of it. So everyone, all they care about is growing the network and the value of the token, but also those early drivers who had to acquire this token when the network was nascent would benefit tremendously from this network taking off and the network growing and the token value appreciating. So for investors, the ways I suggest you start thinking about getting involved is not only start thinking about the tokens and like buying them and acquiring them, but really start thinking about potentially leveraging those tokens and using them to add value to these networks and also add value to yourselves. Because one example I like to give is with the Bitcoin network. When it first launched, the block rewards on Bitcoin were 50 Bitcoin per block. And there's a block every 10 minutes. So every day there's 144 blocks. And at today's Bitcoin prices of, let's say, around 10,000, that's $72 million in value that was distributed to the miners of that network every single day, just for dedicating computing power and storage to this network. So all these decentralized networks will offer similar opportunities where just buying the token isn't where you'll capture most of the value. It's actually using these tokens and powering these networks where you could capture tremendous value. The other cool things are obviously security tokens, but also there's a lot of things on the horizon that you should start thinking of, like not only these open networks, but the new business models that could be created on top of these new networks. So if you have decentralized autonomous drone networks or IoT data marketplaces or whatever it might be, there are going to be brand new business models that these open networks enable, and that's where for-profit activity will really be captured. And there's also cool things like prediction markets and other stuff you should think about. We do a lot for our projects across crypto economics, token design, making sure they do things in a regulatory safe way. And one thing that's cool about us is we have the Consensys ecosystem and our own ecosystem behind us. So we have about 900 people across Consensys doing hundreds of large enterprise engagements. We have projects ranging all industries. So it's really easy to connect dots and make sure these networks really take off and get users. And that's why we focus so much when we do these token sales, focusing on selling to actual users of these networks who are actually going to add value, and not just focusing on selling them to just pure speculators who aren't going to really add value to these networks. But the good news is anyone can participate in these networks, including investors, so that's why we like to try to educate them so they can realize where the real opportunity lies. Very quickly, if you Google Token Foundry standards, we released these 2 weeks ago. We launched something called the Brooklyn Project about a year ago, where we worked with the community and regulators and law firms to try to come up with an approach for how you could sell utility tokens or work tokens that power a decentralized network in a way that would not put you at risk of or mitigate the risk of your token being deemed a security. So we launched these about 2 weeks ago. You could read about them all online. But to quickly run you through some of the highlights of how we go about launching networks and selling tokens, we assess purchasers to make sure they know what they're doing so they understand the risks of dealing with tokens and participating in these networks. We do KYC, AML, and ID verification. We also do background checks on all the projects to make sure that the people who are collecting these funds have never done anything like financially illegal in the past. Our registrations are open to everyone. We're not selling securities. We are selling consumer goods or utilities, and anyone can buy tokens. It's not just limited to accredited investors. But what we do, we don't do crazy discounts or bonuses. We just price our tokens fairly. Everyone pays the same price. We don't give privilege to just institutions. But all purchasers have to prove that they understand what they are buying, what the token actually does, and that they have intent to use it. So we go actually a step beyond that, where we don't sell tokens until there's a live network. So enough of this, you just have a white paper. We make sure you have a product and a working network before we sell tokens. But the cool thing that we came up with, which we do, is that anyone who buys tokens in the initial sale, trustlessly through smart contracts, we actually enforce that they have to use the tokens before they're able to resell them. So if it's a staking token to run a node, you actually have to run nodes. So if you're trying to buy $1 million worth of tokens, we actually require you to run nodes and use those tokens before they're able to be resold. So this, one, will help the networks and make sure that they're actually getting usage, and the people buying these tokens are not just purely speculating, which is damaging to the network. They actually intend to use these things. And the other benefit of this is teaching investors that the real value to be captured is not just holding these things, it's actually using them. So this will hopefully force that, so people start understanding that powering these decentralized networks will fundamentally change the world. And you guys should all get involved and start using these things instead of just holding them. So thank you very much.